Southeast Asia, facts are coming on your way. And we are down to the last Southeast Asian country that we are about to unfold. This is East Timor Report.
So right now, we will tackle all about the basic information, history, landmarks, social and economic organization in Timor-Leste. So right now, the history. So Timor was divided in two islands. First, the west, and second, the east. First, the west is what it was being invaded by the Dutch, and the East Timor was being invaded by the Portuguese. The Timor-Leste, it was came from by the Portuguese and Indonesia. The Timor is from the Portuguese and the Este from the Indonesia. 13th century, the Japanese and Chinese traders introduced the sandalwood, honey, and wax. In 16th century, the Portuguese came in the Timor-Leste. They introduced the coffee production along with the sugarcane and cotton. Pero, pag after nila nga na-introduce na, they also arise the tax and the production of, they use also the forced labor in the people in the Timor-Leste. And they invaded the Timor-Leste for 400 years. So next is the World War II. So in the World War II, the Australian had agreed with the Dutch and British official allied force because the Japanese will enter in the Timor. First, invade sila sa west. Then after that, nakuman naman ang west, they also invade the kanang east. And also, many people died in Timor-Leste, like 50,000 because of the Japanese. But after the Japanese, they agreed nga ang ilang pag-colonize sa Timor-Leste gibalik nila sa Portuguese. So mao to nga ang Timor-Leste na-invade siya for 400 years sa Portuguese. So in November 28, 1975, the Timor-Leste achieved their independence from the Portuguese. But sadly, after 9 days, they invaded by the Indonesia. And Indonesia is a cruel invader in Timor-Leste. They also, many people died also in Indonesian invasion for mostly 200 people. So, after the invasion of Indonesia, they achieved their independence in May 2002. And also in the 2001, first elect first nila nga nag-elect so that nga nag-start na din sila sa constitution nila. After that, dito na nila na-achieve ang kuan nila sa kanang independence and also the constitution in May 20, 2002. So next, we will tackle about their resources. First is oil sector. First that the oil is kana siyang pretty pa ka siya kukusog sa ilang revenues. Kaya ang oil, naghatag ni siya sa government. But ang oil din nila, nagkahinay. Ang next sa lang oil, na sila ay agriculture. So ang land crops, including the rice, maize, cassava, and coffee. So mali siya ang second na sources na ginagamit sa Timor-Leste. So next, we will tackle about their landmarks. So I have two famous landmarks in Timor-Leste. First is the Mount Ramillo. Mani siya ang Mount Ramillo. And next is the Cristoria of Delhi. Kani siya is na siya tuktok nga more siya na siya Jesus nga figure. Lastly, ang social and economic organization. So first, na sila social protection in Timor-Leste because ang status dito sa country sa Timor-Leste, as we all know nga, ang Timor-Leste is baby pa siya since 2002 pa na-achieve lang independence. So they recognize the main challenge such as widespread poverty and malnutrition and other common issues. That's why na sila social protection in Timor-Leste. And second is social inclusion, learning no one behind from the UNICEF. Because the UNICEF get along with the Timor-Leste and defund children. Kaya mostly in the children in Timor-Leste suffered a lot like malnutrition and other healthy issues. And also, aside from that, they also, the Timor-Leste and social organization have community and family, traditional societal structures, cultural diversity, religious influence. Because mostly in the family of them always tied, they value their traditions, culture, and diversity. And next, the economic organizations. So they have the oil and gas deficiency because oil know that their economic resources are gas. So they have a heavy reliance on oil and gases revenues because it finances the government budget. Next, the agriculture. Because the agriculture is also one of their economic resources, it is the vital sector of Timor-Leste, employing a significant portion of the GAP like their crops as a rice, maize, cassava, and coffee. And they had lots of economic resources and organizations like infrastructure development, government initiatives, social and economic development goals. Like they are a kanang nagkuhan sila sa government ka para ang laang like ilaang status mo arise although kay naagi man silang mga katong nag-invade sa ilaa at least gani kani nga part dos economic organization nila muhay na ila ang status. And the sadly part, the 40% in the Timor-Leste are mostly in the poverty and in unemployment. That's all. This is Eunice Balmoria reporting.
To have an overview and better understanding of the government of East Timor, let us first get to know its constitution and its constitutional history. The Constitution of East Timor is the 2002 Constitution which entered into force on March 20, 2002. Dating back in its history, the Portuguese arrived on the island looking for a stopping point in their trade. They were able to manage and maintain hold over the eastern part of Timor, although the Dutch were also present and took control over the western part of Timor. On November 28, 1975, East Timor achieved its independence through the efforts of the organization called FRETILIN, or Frente Revolucionaria de Timor-Leste. This political organization aimed to achieve its independence through the supervision and leadership of K. Rala Sanana Guzmao. However, on December 7, Indonesia invaded Timor-Leste with the aim of overthrowing Fretilin regime and with the context of anti-colonialism and anti-communism. In 1998, Indonesian President Haji Muhammad Suharto was forced to resign due to Asian financial crisis and the widespread of violent protest of Indonesian citizens. And this led to the appointment of his Vice President Bakaruddin Yusuf Habibi as his replacement. Then, on May 5, 1999, a tripartite agreement between the Portugal, Indonesia, and United Nations was made in which they have agreed to hold a referendum under the supervision of United Nations on the plan to increase autonomy under Indonesian flag. If the people rejects this, then the United Nations must take responsibility over the territory of Timor-Leste until it achieves its full independence. The result on August 1999 was a 75% of the people favoring for independence. As a result, the United Nations started setting up a new transitional government to create a constitution and to serve as an international peacekeeping force against the violent movement and violent protest of the people following the referendum. The process was slow because the United Nations haven't had a concrete plan yet regarding the state building formation. But on April 2000, the Security Council of United Nations already created a concrete plan regarding the formation of the Constitution of Timor. A political organization called Consejo Nacional de Resistencia Timorense, or in Portuguese, Congreso Nacional de Reconstrução de Timor, or CNRT, have also discussed about this issue regarding the state building formation of Timor and the creation of a constitution. This political organization was led by K. Rala Sanana Guzmao as well, and they were often called upon to advise the United Nations. In between 1999 to 2000, this organization have also discussed about the creation of a constitutional convention. Most were in favor of public participation and public consultation regarding the process. However, the United Nations have decided that an elected 88-member Constituent Assembly must draft the Constitution within 19 days. Thus, the Constituent Assembly itself must serve as the first national parliament. The Constituent Assembly was sworn in on September 15, 2001, and the constitution they drafted took into effect on March 22, 2002. And the first president of East Timor was Keirala Senana Guzmao. So here is the outline of the Constitution of East Timor, the 2002 Constitution. It started with a preamble stipulating the nation's struggle for independence and the building of a democratic state based on the rule of law. It also stipulates the fundamental rights based on the United Nations Declaration of Human Rights on 1948. And the Constitution divides the power of the government between the president, the government, the parliament, and the courts. So first, the preamble, and part 1 of the Constitution deals with the fundamental principles. Part 2, fundamental rights, duties, liberties, and guarantees. Part 3, organization of political power, which discusses the general principles, the President of the Republic, national parliament, government, courts, and public administration. Part 4, economic and financial organization. Part 5, national defense and security. Part 6, guarantee and revision of the Constitution. And Part 7, final and transitional provisions. At this juncture, let's proceed to the government of East Timor. East Timor has a semi-presidential system of government with a parliament, which means that it is mainly governed by a president alongside with the prime minister. The prime minister is mainly responsible to the legislature of the state. Article 1.1 of the Constitution of East Timor states that the Democratic Republic of East Timor is a democratic, independent, sovereign, and unitary state based on the rule of law, will of the people, and respect for the dignity of human person. Part 3 of the Constitution also discusses the organization of political powers, which covers the President of the Republic, the National Parliament, the government, the courts, and public administration. So the President is the head of state. Currently, the President of East Timor is Jose Ramos Horta. He is from the political party CNRT, or also called as the Consejo Nacional de Resistencia Timorense. To be qualified as a presidential candidate, one must be an original citizen of East Timor, at least 35 years old, and be in his possession of his or her full faculties, and proposed by a minimum of 5,000 voters. The president also have some powers relating to the legislature of the state, which includes promulgating the statutes, approving treaties, and vetoing legislations. He may also appoint certain government officials, such as the Prime Minister and members of the Council of State. He may request constitutional review by Supreme Court, submit referendums, declare war and peace, and grant pardons and honors. The president has a 5-year term, and his office can only be renewed once. He may be removed from office upon death, permanent disability, forfeiture of office, and resignation. The election of a president is through a direct vote and through a system based on the majority express votes. To be declared as the president, one must obtain more than half of the total votes. If no candidate obtain more than half of the total votes, then a second round election must be held, in which the two candidates with the highest votes must be eligible in this election, and this is called the runoff election. He also enjoys immunity before the Supreme Court of Justice in the crimes committed in the exercise of his or her functions that are clear and severe violations of the constitutional obligations. On the other hand, we have the Prime Minister, which is the head of government. Currently, the head of government is Kay Rala Sanana Guzmao. He is also from the CNRT party, or the Consejo Nacional de Resistencia Timorense party. The Prime Minister is designated by majority party in the parliament, which I have said is the CNRT, and he is appointed by the President. The Prime Minister is responsible in overseeing the government. He presides the Council of Ministers, direct and guide general policy and coordinate all activities of the ministers, and he informs the President on the foreign and domestic policies. And he will be removed from office upon loss or resignation from position and upon vote of no confidence from the Parliament. If you read the Constitution of East Timor, you will see the different organs of the state. The main organs of East Timor are the Council of State, the National Parliament, the Government, and the Supreme Court of Justice. The Council of State is the political consultative organ of the President. It is composed of the different former presidents of the state who were not removed from office, the President of the National Parliament, the Prime Minister, five citizens appointed by the President, and five citizens elected by the National Parliament. The Council of State is responsible in giving advice to the President in dissolving the Parliament and dismissing the government and in declaring war and peace. The members of the Council of State can only be removed through loss and resignation from office. Next, the government. The government is the sovereign organ responsible in conducting and executing general policies. It is composed of the Prime Minister, the ministers, the secretaries of the state, and one or more deputy and deputy ministers. The government can only be dismissed upon the beginning of a new legislative term, upon the acceptance of the President of the Prime Minister's resignation, upon death and permanent physical incapacity of the Prime Minister, upon rejection of its program for two consecutive times, and upon vote of no confidence. Under the government, they have what we call the Council of Ministers. The Council of Ministers define the general guidelines of the implementation of government policies. They also approve plans, approve bills, and draft resolutions. The Council of Ministers is composed of the different ministers of the state. So, just like in our country, we have different departments here. So, in East Timor, they also have different ministries, which includes Ministry of Finance, Ministry of Justice, Ministry of Education, Ministry of Health, and so on and so forth. This Council of Ministers is composed of different ministers, and these ministers are responsible in the implementation of policies as defined in their respective ministries. And they must also ensure the relations of the government between the state organs in the area of responsibility of their respective ministries. In addition, the government is the supreme organ for public administration, and the current Prime Minister is again Kay Rala Sanana Guzmao, who was also the very first president of East Timor way back in April 2002. Next, the National Parliament. The National Parliament is a sovereign organ representing the Timorese citizens with legislative and decision making powers. The first national parliament was the Constituent Assembly, established in 2001, who drafted the Constitution of East Timor when the state was still administered by United Nations until it gained its independence on May 20, 2002. The National Parliament is a unilateral parliament composed of 52 to 65 members with a 5-year term. The parliament elects a speaker, 5 members for the Council of State, and it sets up a standing committee. Standing committee sits when the national parliament is under dissolution or recession. The functions of the parliament includes passing legislation, authorizing the government to regulate the organization, procedure, and regulation of courts, and to pass a vote of no confidence. A vote of no confidence is a formal expression of the parliament not to support an office holder, and the members of the national parliament can be removed upon the dissolution of the parliament. Lastly, the Supreme Court of Justice. The Supreme Court of Justice is the highest court of law. Under the judicial branch of the government of East Timor, there are different categories of laws, and that includes the Supreme Court of Justice and other courts, high administrative, tax and audit courts, and other administrative courts of first instance, and the military courts. And the judicial branch also have a superior council for the judiciary, which is responsible for the conduct and discipline of the judges of the Supreme Court of Justice. The Supreme Court of Justice is composed of career judges, magistrates of public prosecution, or jurists, with one elected by the national parliament and others designated by the Superior Council for the Judiciary. And the President of the Supreme Court of Justice is appointed by the President of the Republic. The functions of the Supreme Court of Justice includes constitutional review and consultative jurisdiction. The judges are irremovable except upon death and resignation. Let's proceed to the local government of East Timor. East Timor has four administrative divisions: districts, sub-districts, villages, and aldeias or hamlets. There are 13 districts or municipalities in East Timor, with Dili having the largest population. These districts are subdivided into sub-districts, and there is a total of 67 sub-districts in East Timor, and the largest sub-district is Los Palos. Next, the villages. There is a total of 498 villages in East Timor, and Baucau district has the largest number of villages, which is 64. Lastly, the aldeias or hamlets. It is the smallest unit of administrative division in East Timor. Local government organs. First is the village council or Conselho do Suco. It is comprised of a village chief, which heads a village, hamlet chiefs, which head hamlets, a female delegate, a male delegate, female and male youth representative, which ages 17 to 35 years old, and a lianain. A lianain is a traditional Timorese leader. The second one is the Hamlet Assembly or Asamblea do Aldea. This organ is not elected. It is comprised of all the eligible voters and citizens of Timor in a hamlet. How long is the term of the village council, village chief, and hamlet chief? It is 7 years. And how old is an eligible voter in East Timor? At least 17 years old. So far, there are already 3 local elections held in East Timor, and it established in a regulatory framework. First was the Decree Law Number 5 of 2004. But in order to administer a smooth and better conduct of local elections, a new regulatory framework was established, and that was the Community Leadership and their Election Law, or the Law Number 3 of 2009. And last one is the current regulatory framework, which is the Law Number 9 of 2016, also called as the Law of Sucos. There are 2 electoral bodies in East Timor. The first one is the Secretariado Técnico de Administraco Electoral. It is considered as the main electoral body in East Timor. It is responsible for drafting electoral regulations and code of conducts, and it organizes voters' registration and administers voting. The second one is the Comisão Nacional de Elecos. It is comprised of 7 commissioners, and it oversees the main electoral body's work and approve statutes prepared by the main electoral body, and it also handles procedural complaints. Lastly, Here is an illustration that summarizes the structure of government of East Timor. Let us first start with the voters. As what I have said, the voters of East Timor are at least 17 years old. The voters elect village chiefs, village councils, and hamlet chiefs. This is pertaining to the local government. The voters also elect national parliament, the members of the national parliament, through proportional representation. They do not elect individual candidates, but political parties instead. The Speaker of the National Parliament becomes an ex officio member of the State Council. Remember, the State Council is the consultative organ of the President. The National Parliament also elects 5 members of the State Council. The National Parliament also elects an ombudsman. An ombudsman is in charge to examine and seeks to settle conflicts or complaints of the citizens against public bodies. The National Parliament also elects 1 member of the Supreme Court of Justice. The Supreme Court of Justice is the highest court of the land. The National Parliament also elects 1 member of the Superior Council of the Judiciary. The Superior Council of the Judiciary is the supreme organ of conduct and discipline among the judges of the Supreme Court. The Superior Council of the Judiciary appoints the judges of district courts and appoints the judges of Supreme Court of Justice. Let's proceed to the President. The President becomes an ex officio member of the Supreme Council for Defense and Security. This is a consultative organ of the President relating to the defense and security of the state. The President also becomes an ex officio member of the State Council. This is also the political consultative organ of the President, and he appoints 5 members of the State Council. The President also appoints 1 member of the Superior Council of the Judiciary. He also appoints the Prime Minister and Council of Ministers. The Prime Minister and Council of Ministers appoints 1 member of the Superior Council of the Judiciary. The Prime Minister also becomes an ex officio member of the State Council. That's all. Thank you. This is Shaira May Yakpot reporting. The remaining topics on the ideologies and value systems, interest groups, pressure groups and political parties, and problems and issues in the Democratic Republic of East Timor will be presented by Ms. Eliza Tumaro in another video presentation. That concludes today's report session. We trust that you found the information insightful and valuable. Remember, knowledge is power. This is East Timor Report.